friend, or the sound of anxiety. It's the sound of taking a dub, or the sound of taking an L. But perhaps the most striking of all is that it can be the sound of a welcome visitor, or the sound of an unwanted predator. This universal sound of attention needs to grab yours, so it's important to have a device that can do just that. Grab your attention. I'm able to send video recordings to my phone using my Ring security camera, even though Ring doesn't really allow it. But I went a step further and added object detection with Frigate, and gave Ring the power to alert me only if it detects specifically people, something my off-the-shelf Ring system just can't do. Now, one of my previous videos, I talked about how a stranger tried to break into my home, and the biggest fail was that my smart tech failed to alert me. Disgraceful. Go hang the shame curtains. I know. I'll post the video in the end credits if you'd like to see it, but it's because of that failure why I've created this video. In the comments, many of you expressed disgust for Ring, which I honestly don't find surprising. Since replacing my Ring would put me at an economical disadvantage, I found a way to make the most out of it. By using Ring MQTT add-on and Frigate, I can get features.
Okay, so while I was trying to put together this walkthrough, everything stopped working. It just broke. I wasn't able to get Ring to stream to my Home Assistant anymore. Don't know what happened, don't know why it stopped. All I know is that the batteries died, I recharged it, put it back in, and it just would not work. Everything that I had planned is kind of moot now. So after about 3 days of sitting on the struggle bus, here's my new favorite way to create video automations using Ring, Scrypted, and Frigate.
Let's start with Scrypted. I have a Synology NAS. In it, I have a virtual machine that runs Home Assistant OS, but last week in the midst of my technological hunger game, Home Assistant crashed because Node-RED was just doing the most, really.
As you can see, I ran out of memory on my machine.
As some of you might have seen in my shorts, I've split out Node-RED into its own Docker container, and I'll be doing the same with Scrypted. Here I have a Docker container running Scrypted. I followed the phenomenal installation instructions on Scrypted website. I had a total of 0 problems setting this up. In the Ring plugin, I logged in, at which point I could see all of my devices. The 2 important devices here are the front door and backyard. Here in the settings, the ones I know for sure I need is HomeKit, WebRTC, and Rebroadcast. So I'm not going to talk about the HomeKit version right now, but feel free to explore this because it does work, and I do have the cameras here in my system via HomeKit. What we really want with Scrypted is under Streams and WebRTC. I copied this RTSP rebroadcast link, and back in Home Assistant, I used the generic camera integration. This was required for the doorbell because the automations don't count it as a real live stream camera. I don't think this is required for the backyard camera since it's a real camera, but for demo purposes, I'm gonna be creating a generic camera with it with the RTSP link as well. I did have to change the URL slightly to fit my needs, and you may need to do the same, but it seems like it's working. Okay, now let's create a quick automation using the camera. Okay, so for this automation, you're going to need the call service node, as well as the, I think this is called a timestamp or the inject node. So with the first call service node, this is going to be responsible for taking the camera or getting the camera feed. So you would just go to the domain of camera, service record. This is the camera entity that we created previously that you saw. And then here, this is the file name. This is basically where this stream is going to be saved to, and we can tell it how long to save it. So we're going to take 7 seconds of that feed and save it as snapshot.mp4 at this location. This location can be found within your Home Assistant environment, but you're going to find that within here. I have mine under the config, temp, and then snapshot, as you can see here. So from this call service node, you're going to have another call service node, and this one is going to be responsible for sending it to Telegram. Now, I'm using Telegram. I'm going to show it with Telegram first, and then I'm going to hopefully have another one to show you how you can do it without Telegram. But just using Telegram, we have here, again, Home Assistant. We're using Telegram bot for this one. Real quick, this Telegram bot that you see here in the domain won't exist for you guys if you haven't install the Telegram bot integration, you can go on Home Assistant site and just see the documentation for it. This is what's going to give you the ability to send videos really easy to your particular chat within your Telegram profile. We're telling it that we're going to send video. This is the source or the location where it's stored. So this is what we already have saved. And then this is just if you have your chat ID, the chat ID that you have there. And then of course you can add captions. And that's what's going to come along with it. So the video will just show up 7 seconds and it will appear within Telegram. You can make the automation more elaborate by adding conditions and triggers to dial in where and when the videos should be stored and sent, but I'm gonna leave that to you. Oh, and by the way, if you're interested in building an AI chatbot for yourself, I have an AI Masterclass series playlist where I talk and walk through the conceptualization and implementation of how to do it. Disclaimer though, my guide is simply a starting point because ChatGPT is pretty experimental at the time of creating this, so the APIs may be different, so you may have to put in some work to get it working since things can change. Update the code accordingly if you run into those problems. If we add Frigate to the system, both Home Assistant and our cameras will give up the ghost, so there are 2 things we're going to need to do. First, we will be using Google's Coral Tensor processing unit to process the stream, and I'm told that this is about 1,000 times better than our regular CPU that's powering Home Assistant.
I expect great things from you.
Follow the instructions on Frigate's website to install it into your system. I'm gonna admit I had some issues with this. I successfully installed this into Home Assistant as an add-on, but for some reason Home Assistant wouldn't recognize the Coral TPU, so I went with my long-term plan and installed Frigate as a Docker container. So I'm gonna simply tell you the easy stuff and hope that you don't run into the hard stuff. All right, cool, let's go. On Frigate's website, you can use the Docker Compose file that they have there and just adjust it to fit your environment. The 3 things that I needed to change that you may have to change are the devices, the volumes, and the ports. You'll also need a config file that references the cameras and the settings that you need for them. So here's mine, for example. This is the MQTT information section. Nothing really special, just put in your login information for it. Go to RTC allows me to transform the streams to use the FFmpeg. This will publish the stream to a new source, which we can then see in the camera section. Under cameras, I have the front yard, which uses the RTSP stream path that was re-emitted by Frigate. You can read that in Frigate's docs. These settings in the record option will save the last 2 days of footage that had a true positive object that was not considered stationary. Bottom line is, for the last 2 days, it's going to show me all of the moving people. Now, this is the important bit, the detectors. We have a single USB Coral device, so this is what the documentation told me to put in. Now, Ring activates the stream on demand, and Frigate will demand it stays on. So if your camera is powered by a battery or solar power, it's going to die within hours. Though there's not much you can do about that, something you can do is subscribe and like this video.
Damn, that was smooth.
Yeah, I know. By subscribing and liking, not only can YouTube alert you when I drop new content, but it helps other enthusiasts like yourself find it too. Okay, so let's get into the automation. Something that Ring sucks at is that it doesn't let me know if a person is at the door. It just alerts me for anything that moves. It doesn't support object recognition out of the box or at all, I think. So it just triggers for everything. Using Frigate, we can now trigger automations only when people are detected. Here's a high-level idea of what you need to do to get Frigate installed into Home Assistant. Go to Frigate's website, look at their docs. Under the section of integrations and Home Assistant integration, you're going to find this doc. Just follow it. Pretty simple. You're going to need hacks in order to add the integration. Once you have it installed, you're going to be able to access it or add it via the integrations. When you're in device and settings and click on the add integration button, just search for Frigate. Once you have it, you're going to be able to just add in the URL of where it can find your Frigate server. If you have it locally within Home Assistant, then it would be one of these default values. If you don't, like in my instance, I have it set as a separate Docker container. I simply just need to add that URL to that Docker container here. As a result, you're going to have Frigate installed locally. Right now it's pointing to my current local server for Frigate. and it sees all of the devices. It sees the front yard, it sees the cam. Because of this, you now have access to all of the sensors and entities needed to run different automations. So we can see when motion is detected, we can see the number of objects that it detects, whether or not it's cleared or not. It's fantastic. Remember the first automation that we did in Node-RED? We're going to redo that one, but this time we're going to enhance it with Frigate, and this time we're also going to do it in YAML so you can see what that other side is. I'm still going to show you how to do it in Node-RED though. Call out is that these automations will not work unless you're using the generic camera integration to create the camera entities that we're going to use to record the streams. I'm using this new one here. It's just a camera that I've placed by my window in the front. My Ring camera currently is dead. The battery's died in all of this testing, so I have this other camera here that I'm setting up. So with that being said, process is still the same whether you're using a Ring camera or some other camera. As long as it has an RTSP stream, you can set this generic camera up, and as you can see here, I can see the front of the yard with it. Here's what the automation looks like. For the trigger, right now we're using a state trigger. Whenever the state changes, or in our case for the generic camera, whenever that value changes above 0 for the person count, we got this person count from the Frigate entity that I showed you earlier. When Frigate detects that there is at least one person available, then this is going to fire off, and you can see the same thing here. It's a little easier to read here in my opinion. For that Omnicam count, whenever we see that the state is above 0, then this is going to fire off. This is the same as the first automation that I showed. Essentially, for the action, whenever we detect that there's a person or whenever it's triggered, we're going to just record, and we're going to save that recording locally to Home Assistant. You can see that here, where we're going to use the camera service record. We're basically calling the generic Omnicam. Same thing here. We're saving it to that snapshot, or to that particular, saving the snapshot to this particular location for the duration of 7 seconds. And you can see that the same is here, where we're saving the snapshot to the same location, duration 7 seconds. Lastly, if you have the Telegram integration or the Telegram bot integration, you're going to have this ability for the service. But within this service, we're basically telling the Telegram bot integration that we want to send a video. We're giving it the location of the video that we have saved locally. We're giving it the chat ID that we want to send it to, as well as a caption. And you can see the same exists here, where we're calling the integration. We're giving it the local file location. We gave it a caption, as well as we're telling it the target, which is the chat ID. In the end, you're going to have something that looks like this. With this automation, I can now enable Ring to alert me at night, as there's a higher probability that if it goes off, it will be for a legitimate reason. Now, if you want to send the recording to your phone without Telegram, here's how you can do it. The trigger stays exactly the same. When the camera detects that there is a person, it's going to trigger off. That stays the same for both. The part that we care about is the action. All we have is just one action, and it's the notify action. Now, I will have to call out that you'll probably need the Home Assistant app for your phone. You're going to need it in order for Home Assistant to send you notifications. Using the notification service, select the phone that represents your device, and in the data section, you're going to need to give it a message, and you're also, for the data part, going to have to give it an entity ID as the key, and then the actual entity ID of the generic camera that we created earlier when we were saving the videos. The same thing can be seen here on this side, where we have the message, there's someone in the front yard for the message, and for the data section, we're going to have here the entity ID and the entity name for the generic camera. I'm going to just run it manually here, and on my phone I received a notification, and there it is, live stream of my front yard. So let's recap this really quick. You can stream video from your Ring camera using Scrypted. You can send the stream data to your generic camera entity, and that gets streams to your dashboard, or you can save it to a hard drive or send it to your AI chatbot if you have it. It's up to you how you want to use it. As a bonus, through Scrypted, you can also install the cameras via HomeKit, which can give you access to motion sensor data and help you to better tailor your automations. We can dial in everything further using Frigate bundled with the Coral TPU and process the stream from Scrypted to run machine learning to detect if a person is detected, as opposed to the generic motion of animals, cars, and shadows that Ring gives you out of the box. Now, though you are able to create automations based on the number of people detected, this keeps the stream open on your device, so it rapidly drains your battery, and it's not advised by Ring or other manufacturers really, so keep that in mind. I wonder, is there a way to enable and disable Frigate on the fly?